Good morning, everyone. Bladen Breitreiter, incident meteorologist, here with Jasmine, sign language interpreter, to give you a weather update for the Hermit's Peak and Calf Canyon fires for Monday, May 23rd. So we had a very, very chill night last night. Continued to see improved relative humidity recovery in and around the entire fire, with the best recoveries being up in the northern zone, but by best, we're still looking at, 95% versus getting into the upper 80s here. So overall, excellent humidity recovery last night. Winds were also completely reasonable, maintaining a downslope down canyon persuasion, and our temperatures were also pretty reasonable, looking at actually getting into the mid 30s and the lower 40s as opposed to the freezing temperatures that we saw the other night. So looking real good as far as overnight conditions are concerned, but with moisture comes great responsibility, right? So with all of that today, we're looking at getting a little bit of invigoration in terms of instability and lift. Add moisture in, you got the three ingredients for thunderstorms as we go into today. So temperatures today are going to increase a little bit, about 2 to 3 degrees across the area, getting into the 60s primarily, and then as we get across some of the lower elevations and across the plains here, that's where we will start to see our temperatures starting to get and slide into the lower 70s. The big change, we've had a lot of easterly wind here. We had a good bit of south wind here. Both of those persuasions do lend themselves to allowing moisture to stick around as we go into the day. So we've had a couple days of looking at 20 to 30% across the fire perimeter during the afternoon for minimum relative humidities, which is a huge change compared to the single-digit relative humidity values that we have seen previously since the start of this thing. But the moment you start adding a west wind, that's when things start to change. West winds really love to scour out moisture in this area. So we will see a reduction today in minimum relative humidity, getting back into the teens as we go into the afternoon hours. Those west winds is going to be primarily a southwest today to start out the day. They're going to try to turn a little bit more to the west-southwest as we go into the afternoon hours, and then they will increase, getting up into the 15 to 20 mile an hour range with gusts between 25 and 28. The exception to that rule, of course, being the further you get out into the plains, where we will see gusts getting in excess of 30 miles an hour. Up in the Motor River Valley, you can expect that to be pretty reduced. We definitely see those winds slacken off and are more terrain influenced as we get into those afternoon hours. The more sporty and spicy winds will be localized across the south zone today. So let's take a look at what is happening in the world of water vapor imagery. It's going to fall down. There it goes. Okay, cool. So we do have the trough. We talked about this yesterday. The aforementioned trough that has come in has swooped on into the Great Basin here and is starting to really carve out. Yesterday was a lot flatter. Now we're starting to see this energy deepen here. And when we have troughs, we can expect a couple things. We can expect winds to be a little bit more intense, especially in and around the base here, the very close eastern periphery and the very close western periphery here. Right in this area, we can expect things to get a little bit spicier wind-wise aloft, and you can definitely see that across Colorado, whereas down here with us, we're looking at 35 to 40 knots. As we get into Colorado, they're looking at more of a 50 to 50 knot pattern. So it'll be a little bit windier up in that direction, not so much here. It'll be more business as usual as far as winds go for the southern Sangre de Cristo Mountains in the spring. The big thing to take of note here is while we have this trough here, we have a lot of mid-level water vapor coming in. You can even see some indications of those high clouds, which are currently out and over us right now. And then We have kind of an influx of Gulf moisture here from the Gulf of Mexico coming in through Texas. And so that's going to start to collide, and we'll see that moisture start to come back in as return flow across the eastern portion of the state today. So trough, added instability. Remember, instability is the propensity for air to want to be displaced and rise, or buoyancy is a good way to think about it. Air doesn't want to do that. Air is tired like I am. It wants to lay down. So that's our first thing. Now we got the moisture coming in. We're missing one key ingredient, and that's going to be the lift. So as this trough continues to move on out, it is going to trigger another cold front to come down. And so that is going to help kind of set the stage for what we're seeing today. So early in the day, come back over here and grab the sword off the floor. Early in the day and into the early afternoon hours, we're probably going to see across the two spines of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains here, we're going to see some initiation of some towering cumulus clouds. Remember, that's also a really good indicator that you might be seeing some increased activity as far as weather goes. When you have cumulus clouds that start to get a little bit of vertical extent, that's when you know that the atmosphere is becoming increasingly unstable. So we'll monitor that. And today it looks like they're actually going to be favoring more of the northern zones here. They will kind of sit and grow upscale before they finally can get mature enough to push off, at which point they'll head in an east-northeast direction across the fire today. South zone not as favored for that action, but that doesn't mean that the south zone is going to be out of the line of fire, no pun intended, for the activity today. So as stuff is moving across in and around the fire perimeter today, it could get out here and collapse, sending outflow winds back at us. So it's something that we as meteorologists have to monitor as we go in through the day today, to keep an eye on what's happening here, what's happening over our zones across the fire, and then even once it gets well out here and into the eastern plains, we have to watch and make sure that we're not going to get any sort of blowback coming back in that could catch those firefighters off guard as things change throughout the day. So as we go in through the night, those storms will diminish a little bit. They're going to push on into the far eastern plains where they will get far more organized and enter an environment that's a lot more favorable for them to become stronger. But something that is going to occur for us as we go into the overnight hours is we're going to get kind of a resurgence of activity. So that cold front, aforementioned cold front, is going to do similarly like it usually does. We'll see these winds start to change over from southwest. They're going to go a little bit more northwest, so winds coming from this direction, eventually landing north. And during that time, about 9 p.m. to about 3 a.m., we're going to see some increasing activity again along the upper terrain here for the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. This edition of it looks to favor the south zone quite a bit more. So north zone's looking to see a bit more action as we go into the afternoon. South zone gets that prime time, and they'll see a little bit more action as we go into the overnight hours. Now everything should start to chill out as we get into the early morning hours, and as we get into Tuesday, things change again. So we've talked about the ingredients for thunderstorms. We got moisture, we got lift, and we have instability for sure. Now, if you want a severe thunderstorm, you have to add an extra ingredient, and that's where wind shear comes into play. So wind shear is best thought of as changes in either wind speed or wind direction with height. And what we're looking at in this neck of the woods for this particular event is that wind shear increasing in strength as it goes up into the upper portions of the atmosphere, transitioning through into that moisture layer, that 500 millibar layer, and upwards. And that is what's going to allow the thunderstorm itself to actually tilt a little bit. So as thunderstorms grow up, air mass, your typical air mass thunderstorms grow up, they are very linear in their orientation. So they'll have their updraft right over their downdraft. That's not necessarily healthy. It causes contamination of that updraft, and that is not sustainable. So that's why those thunderstorms that are not severe end up just causing more nuisance hazards and impacts and don't necessarily cause hail. They're not necessarily very long-lived. You know, we see them, especially in monsoon season. They grow up, they do a little bit of nuisance, and then they collapse, and that's we get those gusty and erratic outflow winds. In a severe storm, that updraft is tilted because of those imposing wind speeds at the higher portions of the storm. So that allows the updraft and the downdraft to be localized away from each other and allows it to maintain a certain amount of health and longevity as it continues to go on and live and go towards the eastern plains, especially in and around here. So that allows that storm to become more organized. If you have what's called directional shear, so, you know, starting with, like, say, a south or southwest wind, and then that changing into, you know, migrating around the common wheel of misfortune of winds there, that is what can allow for rotation in a thunderstorm and its particular structure. Not something that we're looking at tomorrow, but what we're looking at tomorrow is definitely going to be the addition of wind shear and speed shear at that. So that's going to allow Tuesday to be a little bit spicier. So we'll have a little bit of a decrease in temperatures. We'll have an additional increase in our minimum relative humidity. Winds will be 20, gusts 30, mostly localized to that thunderstorm development, and the 40% that you see here, that is due to that. And of note is going to be the Haynes Index here. So Haynes Index is a measure of moisture and of instability. So when it comes to days like this, it's used often as a kind of indicator for fire danger and how it can affect fire behavior, the dryness and the instability therein. As we go into days like tomorrow, it has a tendency to mask some things because you would think, well, the instability is pretty incredible tomorrow, but because we have that added bit of moisture, the Haynes Index is only a 4. So it's just something to consider. If you're ever looking at a Haynes Index out of context, just always consider that there's something else going on if you see some of these other values. You have to ask the question, why is this the way it is? So that is looking to pick up in and around the majority of this whole area tomorrow. We'll see that start to fire off as we get into the late morning hours, and then those will do just like they would usually do, push off, kind of gain them strength across the fire perimeter here as they get a little bit closer to I-25. So they do have the potential tomorrow to actually become stronger as they move across the fire area and into the eastern plains tomorrow, as opposed to today, which is going to be your more garden variety air mass thunderstorm. So two similar days as far as kind of the impacts and hazards could go. Both have thunderstorms, but two very different thunderstorm varieties tomorrow. Today, garden variety. Tomorrow, the potential for strong and also severe as they get a little bit further out into the eastern plains. Looking a little bit further into the midweek here, Wednesday and Thursday going to be more of transition days there, moderated conditions, warming and drying. And then as we get into Friday and Saturday, we were going to see the potential return for critical fire weather conditions. So that's all I have for you guys. This is my last briefing with you guys today. I am timing out, but that doesn't mean I'm going very far. I am a meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Albuquerque, so even if I'm not here, I will still be keeping an eye on you guys just from down the road down there. I just wanted to say thank you for all your sweet comments. I don't typically read comments, but they were sent to me enough times that I did start to take a look and see what people were saying, and y'all are awesome. It's hard to be away from your family when you're out here for these extended period of time. I've been at the Hermits Peak and Calf Canyon Fire for around a month, So with a little bit of a break in between. So it's awesome to know that there are cool folks out there. So thank you for that. Please continue to be kind to yourselves. Stay resilient like I know you are. Stay rock and roll. And I will see you next time.